The Ottoman Empire, it flourished. And it flourished until the dawn of our current calamity and our current puzzlement. In 1917, the 3 battles of Gaza splashed across our headlines at the time, but we have profoundly forgotten them. What were the battles of Gaza? The first 2 were between the British forces and the Ottoman forces. The Ottoman forces fighting for the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the British fighting for imperial glory. And the first 2 battles were won by the forces of the Khilafah, and General Allenby was soundly defeated. The 3rd battle was different. The 3rd battle introduced the principle that has characterized the tragedy of the region ever since. The tragedy of insincerity, double standards, hypocrisy, backstabbing, and treason. The reason why the caliphal forces crumpled and were defeated in the region, having held them triumphantly for so many centuries against all comers, was not because they were incapable of dealing with these external enemies. They defeated the British at Gallipoli. Great humiliation. The greatest humiliation in the career of Winston Churchill was his defeat at Gallipoli. Despite all of the suffering that the empire had experienced, they could still defeat the British Empire, and the imperial troops were routed on the beaches of Gallipoli. They were doing the same at Gaza, and then something unprecedented in the history of Islam took place. And what was that unprecedented event? The Great Treason, al-Khiyanat al-Kubra. Who was it who was fighting alongside the British? In the propaganda portraits of the time, the British Tommy with his solar helmet, with the machine gun, the Lewis gun, pointed at the distant Turkish lines. And you can just about see the Tarbushis and the Ottoman army there. Who is feeding the bullets into the machine gun? It is the local Arab ally. That's the Great Treason. The uprising of Arab nationalists against the Khalifa of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for the sake of British promises and British gold and the opportunity to sack Damascus. If you look at the pages of history in any civilization, you will be hard put to find a comparable act of treason. That is why the 3rd battle of Gaza did not go our way, and why the story of the city ever since has been a story not of prosperity under a united Islamic realm, but of division, partition, occupation, and now catastrophe at the hands of a merciless, powerful oppressor. The obvious moral lesson for that is be united. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Hold fast altogether to the rope of Allah. At that most critical point of the history of the Ummah, one section of the Ummah, the Arab nationalist cause decided to change sides, to cross the lines and to fight for Whitehall against Istanbul. In our vision of history, that must be important, and perhaps that treachery, that insincerity, that hypocrisy lies at the spiritual heart of this rotten situation. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still angry with those people. So colossal was that betrayal, and so absolute was their rejection of the idea that they might even acknowledge that they made a mistake, that those people have been subjected to punishment after punishment after punishment. Look at the origins of this. Then we can begin to do 2 things. First, we can pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness for the people of the region. And secondly, we can start to reorient our thinking, recognizing that the secular alternative, the banner of Arabdom in this case, but there was also banners of Turkish nationalism that soon came, banners of Iranian nationalism, banners of Pakistani nationalism, all of these new forms of Jahiliyyah have actually not delivered even on their own terms. Look at the states of the modern Middle East. Each one of them is, by any standards, a failure. Political failure, an ethical failure, an economic failure, military failure, diplomatic failure. The failure of the old slogans that bravely thought that they could replace the principles of Islam means that it's time for us now to start looking for something better, because we've experimented with that and it hasn't helped anybody. It hasn't even helped the West particularly, because it's harder to make money out of a region that's kind of in a ruinous state. Nobody really benefits from this. But the Muslim response, the awareness of the categoric uselessness of those regimes, the response has not been the right response. The response, first of all, must be a laser-sharp awareness that that treason must be repented of. And that's still not the case. Things have gone wrong with history. But the believer can see meaning. He knows that the Aqsa is one of the most important lightning rods for meaning in human history, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means well for that holy place, and one day he will place it once again in the hands of a holy people. But they must be a holy people. Not people with silly slogans, not people with scores to settle, not enraged armies of Islamists destroying the settlements. When we become ready in our hearts to approach the holy city of Jerusalem in that spirit, which is the Quranic spirit and the spirit of the Sahaba, and the real spirit of the Salaf, then the city's gates will be open to us. But there's no reason, if you look at history, to suppose that they will be open to us if we are banging upon them with jahiliyyah in our hearts.